Hey, it's Obi Chikuma, Space and Equity. We're all about increasing assets and creating new space. Real bankers for real people. Here with a great partner, a necessary partner, the foundation of the legal side. So y'all don't try to come and take our stuff. Sean Tate with Tate Law Firm. Sean, pleasure to have you.
Brother Obi,
Great
thank you for
to
having
have
me,
you,
man.
man.
Thank you for having me.
So,
Yeah.
if you guys don't know, if you run a business and you don't have legal support, you are absolutely doing it the wrong way.
That's a fact.
So we made sure that we got started the right way. Sean and I think we met about a year ago.
Yeah. It's been a little bit over a year.
It's been a little over a year, and we're still at the genesis of our dream. But you've been at the foundation and the core. But it's interesting. I just learned something brand new, fresh off the press, that you were an actor. You left that part out the equation.
Yeah,
What's going on? So tell us a little about tell us your credits. We want to know.
All right. Okay.
We want to know.
I usually don't talk about it. It's just something that I did as a kid. But I think the number one thing I want to say first is I've always been like this, man. I wanted to hustle since I was a baby. I got into acting for probably a different reason than a lot of people. A lot of people ask me, did your mom force you to get into it? Were you one of those kids, where they, make you go to the auditions and do all that type of stuff? That was not my experience. My experience was, it's actually very particular in my mind. I remember being a kid about 7, 8 years old, and there was a toy called My Buddy at this time.
I remember that.
Do you remember My Buddy?
I can remember the commercial.
My buddy.
My
buddy. Right. Okay, so I wanted one, right? I wanted a My Buddy. My mom couldn't afford no My Buddy, right? It wasn't gonna happen.
Yeah.
But what struck me most was why My Buddy was like a blonde white kid, and so was the kid playing with him.
Yeah.
And it really struck me that, man, how come I can't play with that? You know what I mean? Like, where's my representation? I didn't have that word at 8 years old, right? But I was like, where? I just didn't. I felt like I wanted the consumer product, but where's the connection to who I am, to my experience, right? And so for me, that really drove me to want to be a representative for us, on a larger scale.
Okay.
It just so happened that there were what they call cattle call auditions, for some commercial or other. I really don't remember exactly what it was. No, it was I don't know exactly what it was. Either way, it was some sort of commercial where they had us do a sing and dance kind of thing. Told my mom I wanted to do it. She said, cool. I went and learned some song from Fiddler on the Roof, did my whole thing. And, the agents liked it. So they put me on the news a couple days later, and they said, young talent in Chicago, Illinois, and they had several kids. And so maybe 7 or 8 of us were on this news segment. And so all of us got a lot of calls from agents at that point. And it just kind of went forward from there. And so I would say from about age 8 to 18 or so, I was pretty deeply involved in the entertainment industry. Commercials, voiceovers, small parts in TV shows and movies, things like that. And so, to the credits, I think some of the bigger ones, I got to work with Michael Jordan on a commercial.
That's a big one.
That was fun. That was a lot of fun.
What was the commercial selling?
It was at around the time of NBA Jam being a big thing. So it was a McDonald's commercial, and Michael Jordan was their head sponsor at that time. So we just did one of those, Michael Jordan hanging out with a kid from Chicago type commercials, right?
Okay.
So and then other small things. I got to be in ER a couple of times. ER is set in Chicago. It's not filmed there, so they do all the filming at Northwestern University. So I did some stuff there. Got to be in a couple of movies. Probably the most well-known one is Richie Rich. It was a film, Macaulay Culkin film right after Home Alone.
Okay. And, kind of a big deal, a big credit at the time. If you were our age, that was a big deal.
It was, believe me. You know what I mean? It meant it changed a lot, at that time. And then I got to work with Oprah. She did a film called There Are No Children Here. Back around that same time, I must have been maybe 11 years old, and so I got to act in that film as well. So, and it did a lot of voiceover work, and man, put myself through high school, right? Because where I grew up, I wasn't going to that high school, right? You know what I'm saying?
Okay, so
Mom didn't want me to go, but we didn't really know how to pay for it. And, thankfully, we had pulled together something that allowed some money to come in the door and allowed me to go to a private school, which I really think is, a big part of why we're sitting here today, having this conversation, as opposed to me being in a very, very different place in life. So.
You know, it's interesting. So now you do business, you do contracts.
Yeah.
And you were doing contracts at 8 years old.
Yeah, absolutely.
You probably didn't know you were doing
Wow.
contracts, but you were doing contracts, and that's what life kind of builds on itself.
You know, it's funny. You said that, and it reminded me of the first time I looked at a contract, and it was actually a contract for some commercial I was doing.
Okay.
And I was trying to figure out how come I got to work, right? And none of my friends worked.
Yeah.
You know what I mean,
Yeah.
right? Like, we're in school, right? Like, we're in like 5th grade, 4th grade, 3rd grade. Nobody's thinking about making money. And I was like, I know they have like child labor laws, you know, in the United States. Like, how does that work? And I remember reading through the contract, and that's where I learned, oh, your parents have to approve it.
Okay.
You know what I mean? Like, yeah, the law says you can't force kids, you know, to do any kind of work before 16 in the United States. But if your parents give you approval, that was the first legal document I ever looked at.
Yeah.
And this is the first time I've ever thought of that.
Wow.
You know,
Wow.
in my
Wow.
life. So yeah, I guess it did lead somewhere.
Why didn't you stay in the game? Why didn't you stay in the acting game?
Yeah, you know, I mean, obviously it was, you know, pretty glamorous lifestyle for a young person to have. It was a lot of reasons to want to stay in it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? A lot of big dreams, a lot of great ideas, things that could happen. What I discovered was, and I discovered it early in my acting career, was basically in order to get a job as an actor, you stand up in front of folks, you do some kind of a sing and dance, you know, some kind of step and fetch, and you hope they like it enough, right? And it's literally, you know, one person standing with, you know, 10 other folks watching, you know, casting agents, producers, directors, etc. Just you know, sitting back watching what you do, and what happens to you in that moment essentially decides your fate, right? And as a really young person, making the kind of money that I could make just doing one little commercial, right? And seeing the kind of accolades and you know, love I got from fake love, but you know, like people, you know, wanting to be around me from that was intoxicating, right? And what I experienced was, okay, so to get what I want in life, you know, to have a little bit of money, to be able to, you know, make a difference in the world, to do things that I want to do, I have to listen to what these 10 people say to do that, you know, and essentially what I felt a sense of powerlessness in that. It didn't matter how much I put into it. There's just a few people saying based on how they felt, you know, how they feel about what I did at that moment, whether or not I was good enough, right? Yeah. And that's a feeling I couldn't live with for the rest of my life. So around the age 15, 16, I made a decision that you know what, I'm going to go to college. You know, I said basically, I'm going to go to college, and I'm going to figure out a way to have more agency in my destiny, right? Then you can get, you know, standing in front of, you know, 10 random people who may feel like they like you that day, or maybe they don't. I said, I'm smart. Yeah. You know, I've got a lot to give, you know. I knew I did. And I knew that the only way I could do it on my terms, or more on my terms, was to take control of it, you know, build a skill set, and work from there. So
it's a struggle that you find out, and this doesn't only apply to Black actors, but when we find ourselves when we're in the public square, we can have a glamorous position, but don't have that power or agency.
Right. That's absolutely true.
Unfortunately, we don't have the opportunity to transition as effectively as some of our white counterparts in the same space.
Absolutely true.
They can go straight from being the employee to the owner, and we're taking step. 20 years after professional career, you're still an assistant coach. Right. Whereas you can have a guy, the Nets head coach, no head coaching experience at all. Steve Nash is the head coach. The Nets skipped all the steps.
Every single
so you said, hey, I'm not going to play that game.
Right. That's ultimately what it came down to, man. I couldn't find a sense of self-actualization, of agency, and it didn't do wonders for my self-esteem to feel that I had no power to really control any aspect of my destiny, right? It just depended on what these 5 or 6 people said that day. So I knew it would be not as flashy, not as glamorous, to go a different route, but I could create something. I could really build something for myself. So yeah, that's what kind of started me on the path towards college.
When did you know? So you started acting at 8 years old.
That's right.
When did you know I'm going to college? This is not the path I'm going to stay on.
I would say about age 16. It took till about 16 years old. Honestly, 8 years in that business and experiencing the ups and downs, the successes and the failures, the highs and the lows. I knew after 8 years, as tired as I was of that mess, I couldn't do it forever, man. I just couldn't do it forever, So I had various ideas, but they all sort of revolved around what kind of business can I have that would, at the time it was like, I wanted to do something in the entertainment space, right? So I said, okay, I don't really want to be in front of the camera. How do I get behind the camera, right? And so I said, okay, maybe I'll go to school in like a radio, television, and film program, right? That was my first thought. This was, at the very nascent stages of figuring out that I needed more than, again, just a few people deciding my destiny. I needed to figure out how to get behind it. How does this work? How did they get there? How do I get on the other side of this table, right? So that was really the beginning of just thinking through how to create an entrepreneurial approach that would give me more agency, more control, more sense of self in my career.
So you decide, did you go straight from undergrad to law school, or was there steps between?
Oh, there were steps, bro.
Okay.
There were quite a few steps. Actually, my first job was in social work.
Okay.
So, again, I've always been a person that's interested in how we can help other people, how we can help communities grow, how we can help people have better existence, better experiences. I wanted to be a part of that puzzle, a part of solving that puzzle. And so, again, as a very young person, I graduated high school at 17. So going into college at that time, I was like, well, we just got to figure out how to save the world. Like, where's that? Where's the save the world thing at?
Okay.
And so, I gravitated towards social work because I saw that as at that time, how can I get involved in or help create programs or help create a world where people can have a much better experience. And when I'm talking about people, I'm talking about my people. I'm talking about the environment from which I came, right? I said, okay, maybe this is a way I can help. And so, my first career was in social work. I worked for a short period of time in a statewide organization that helps provide funding for domestic violence shelters, right? I said, okay, this is a good start. I can help people. I can learn how to manage. This will work well. Didn't last very long, in that world. I realized it wasn't really for me. But I learned a lot. I learned a lot about management, and I learned a lot about how change really happens.
Okay.
And what I discovered was the nonprofit space can be extremely useful, right? But ultimately, it's governed by a whole set of people who have their own mandates and their own deliverables. And so you can't really put your gift to the world through most existing large nonprofit structures, right? Yeah. So my next job was working for a nonprofit adjacent. Technically, universities are nonprofits, right? Yeah. So again, I was living in Austin at the time, just finished college, worked at this nonprofit, and then I got recruited by the University of Texas athletics department. They were specifically looking for people to help mentor the young men that go through that program. And I said, okay, sign me up, plus they paid me well. So, between the two of those, I said, let's do that, right? So went over to the University of Texas, and I got the opportunity to work with a lot of athletes that we all know today, right? Okay. I'm not going to names, but, Olympians, NBA, NFL, yada, yada, down the line, right? Yeah. Got to meet a lot of those folks. And what I learned in that space, which I hadn't realized, was the college experience of athletes, which, as you know very well, for most of them is not really college. You know what I mean?
Employment.
It's employment. It's a job.
Employment. Yes.
It's a job. They work more than me. Yeah. So, they're putting in 8-10 hours on their job and then expected to go to class. Yeah. Which obviously doesn't work because they don't have the time, the energy, the resources outside of everything else. They're doing 2 days, every day for 6 weeks. Like that, you also can't study for a chemistry exam during that time, right? And then I started to kind of unpack the layers. So, what kind of degree programs are we offering to these young people, right? Well, at I shouldn't say this, but I'm going to. At the University of Texas, they had a degree that we called the VY degree, and
so it sounds like Vince Young.
That sounds like Vince, doesn't it? That's when we were doing that, right? It was like during the VY time, right, when Vince was there. And I won't talk about what the degree was, but that was the degree into which we were mandated to funnel all of the athletes, right? Because the classes were easy, right? Yeah. Weren't very intellectually challenging because they don't have time to take on intellectual challenges. Not that they couldn't handle it, but they literally don't have time because they have a full-time job. So what classes can we find that are the easiest classes where we have the most influence over the department heads to be able to make sure that even if they don't show up to class for 6 months,
You
they
don't
pass.
make this thing happen.
So I was one of the people. I ended up being inadvertently, not my intention. I went there to try to help, right?
Yeah.
I couldn't wait to go there and start teaching about, economics, how we're going to, this is how you carry yourself. Again, coming from that domestic violence background. Okay, brothers, y'all got all the girls in the world. You know what I'm saying? Things are going to happen. People are going to say this, and this. Here's how you need to move to make sure you don't end up like this person. You know what I mean? That was my goal. What ended up happening was I got put into that system of how we maintain these professional athletes.
Them eligible. Mr. Tate,
Rest.
we don't worry about all that. We need him eligible.
That's exactly correct. And so I was very disheartened and disillusioned by my experience. But you know me, I'm not going to stop, right? I said, okay, so what do we do with this? You know what I mean? Because obviously this system, I see what it is now. And I'm really grateful that it's starting to change. Those lawsuits have been going on for 15 years. But finally, we're starting to see NCAA players getting endorsements and things of that nature. But at that time, that was not the case. Yeah. But I said, okay, what can I do from here? So I kind of looked around at my life and my experience at that time. Again, some professional athletes today that a lot of people know. I remember one of them came into my office because he was, he was about to be gifted a vehicle, but the car dealership said, all you got to give us is the down payment. And we won't get into why he got the vehicle for free. That's not the purpose of this podcast. But they said, we just need to bring a down payment. This brother was 22 years old. And he said, Sean, what's a down payment? What does that mean? Right?
Yeah.
I'm like, you're on your way. You know what I mean? You already got your contract rocking over here.
And you don't understand this simple element. How can you not be fleeced and exploited?
It's a given almost at that point. So that's when I realized, okay, Sean, you've been in the world for a while. You see where people are. Your goal from day one was to figure out how to help empower your community and the people in it. What's the next step look like, right? So I said, okay, maybe a sports agent, right? Maybe sports agent. That was the next idea. Okay, so I look into that. And I find out that the majority of really successful sports agents, other than the ones that, are just absolute business moguls, are lawyers. They go to law school. Yeah. And that's what got me thinking about law school as a way to move forward. Learn more about the sports agency world, quickly bowed out, understanding how that world operates. Yeah. I already had enough of that, making 50, 60 grand a year. I wasn't going to do the same thing for 5 times, 10 times that, forever. I didn't want to be in that world. But what I did know was I wanted to find ways to help people like that young man I described to have the resources that they would need to be able to turn their talent and their opportunity into their legacy. Okay. That was my goal. Yeah. So when I went to law school, I had no intentions of being a litigator or going to court and fighting people. I wanted to do deals. I wanted to figure out how to do deals, how the business work, right? Yeah. How do I get to the other side of the table? And how do I bring that back to my community? Yeah. Well, a lot of people talk about it, but really the only way to do it is to go learn. You have to go into those skyscrapers in downtown, wherever, and grind it out, and work on a deal that might be, the first deal might be $5 million. By the end of it, you're doing $10 billion deals. Yeah. But you're working those 16 hours a day. For me, it wasn't about the money. It was about gathering the knowledge. Okay. That was my goal. And I did that. And as soon as I saw an exit opportunity, I left. And I started my own practice. Yeah. My very first client, who is to this day a very good friend of mine, she and her husband and their kids, and my kids all know each other and, get along very well. She is a dentist. Okay. And she said, you know what? I've been working for this, whatever big dentistry. I won't say their name, for a long time. I want to start my own thing. And she had come to me saying, I heard you're a lawyer and I want to work with a black attorney. I said, great. Yeah. But I was still at the firm. So I said, you got to pay them firm rates to get me. And she said, Sean, if I get to work with you, I'll pay him. I said, phenomenal. So when I decided to leave the law firm, I called her first and I said, I'm leaving. Yeah. What else do you need? Who else can you introduce me to? How do we build around this? So even our very first client was a young black professional who had made it to a certain level, right? And was looking to really expand. But she needed legal services of the sophistication that you can usually only get from those large law firms. So that's what I built the entire firm around was let me take the skill set and the resources that I've gained from big law and bring them to my community.
Yeah.
That was the goal, and that's how we've built out.
So maybe that's why there's so much synergy between us. Because so Tate Legal is space and equity. You guys do the law, we do banking, but we're essentially bringing the big bank experience to the clients, and incorporating that relationship. So wow,
exactly.
You learn every day how these synergies come about, and a lot of the people that we know in common, there's a UT tie as well. So there's a gentleman that I actually just met through Dwayne. He's in real estate. I think his name, I want to say, is it Greg? He's a developer.
I know.
He was a walk-on at
Greg Ellis.
Greg. No, it's not Greg Ellis. But I know Greg Ellis.
Cowboys.
But that's
never mind. That's the Cowboys. UT Greg.
Gosh, let me see this. And I don't know why I'm going down this rabbit hole, but I'm going down this rabbit hole for the purpose of relationship. Josh Chapman.
Oh, I've known Josh for years.
Okay, so Josh has the UT. Did you guys meet at UT?
No, we met here.
So Josh is he was a walk-on.
That's right.
And I apologize, I'm putting Josh's business out there, but I say that what happens is you develop these relationships, and there's a lot of like-mindedness where we want to take from not just going to the corporate space for the sake of grabbing the dollars, which you need to, but you really need to grab the education.
That's what it's about.
If we're going to do anything to impact our community properly, we need to take the data, because there's a way to formulate wealth that is just foreign to our community.
That's absolutely right.
It's just foreign.
Oh, I would love to talk about that, when we get to that portion. But, to your point about our synergies, while I run a law firm that has several attorneys and we're a full service law firm, my work is in securities law, which is essentially fund formation, right? Which is exactly what we're talking about. Our communities talk often about collective economics, how we're going to work together, raise money together, and do deals together. There is an existing blueprint that has been used successfully for generations by people of all stripes.
Yep.
Pretty much except us, And so now what I'm really excited about, and what I kind of built my legal practice around, is finding those people. And we are out here around the country.
Yes.
I represent clients all across the country that are raising money to buy real estate deals, to buy businesses, and helping them to structure that and figure out how to do it in a legally compliant way is also the best way to do it, from the perspective. It's not just, the law is not there just to slow people down, you know what I mean? No. And make it tough. The idea is, here's a way you can do it that protects you, that protects your investor, and make sure you make the most money possible with as little possibilities for people messing that up for you. You know what I'm saying? So it already exists. Yeah. So I focused my career on that, and that's where I focus my practice today.
So just for the audience's sake, a fund is a group of qualified investors. We can get to that dynamic that says, hey, we don't know the project quite yet, but if we're gonna do something like this, and when the opportunity arises, we have the capital to go ahead and deploy.
Yes.
And what happens is we do the reverse. We have the great idea, and then we're like, okay, now I got to get the money. The bank, I don't know anything about the bank. I'm going to go to the bank. Rather than say, let's have the money ready to go. Yeah. Let's have the professionals ready to go. And now we just execute on the idea.
Absolutely.
You mentioned that sometimes a law is there to protect you, to make you more efficient. The term qualified investor. Define what a qualified investor is, and then we'll talk about why that's valuable.
Yeah, so there's several different levels of investors, right? So there is the qualified purchaser, the qualified client, the accredited investor, and the non-accredited investor, right? And essentially, the short version of it is, as you go up that list, they get richer. You know what I mean? So most people are would be non-accredited investors, right? And that essentially means that either individually they make equal to or less than $200,000 a year, or together with their spouse, they make less than $300,000 a year, right? I believe 13% of of the American population qualifies as an accredited investor.
Okay.
Right.
So 87% of the U.S. population are non-qualified investors.
Non-accredited investors.
Non-accredited investors.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, they're non-accredited investors. So, and then it just goes up, right? Qualified client, you got to have at least 5 million. Qualified purchaser, it goes up from there, right? But for most of the fundraising that would be applicable to, folks that are really trying to start bringing things together, they're going to be accredited investors and non-accredited investors. Once you go up there, you're talking family offices, private equity firms, pension funds, university systems, right? And so one of our funds is $1 billion fund. We're only working up there, right? But most of our funds are regular people, you know what I mean, that have figured out how to come together. So those are the differences. Essentially, we're looking at non-accredited investors and accredited investors. And so when you want to raise money from them, the government has an interest in how you do that, right? The government's idea is, again, not to hem anybody up, not to jam people up, but to protect the investors.
Informed consent.
Exactly. How informed is that consent? That is what the SEC is interested in, right? The SEC and state boards that regulate this kind of stuff. Basically, they want to know if you bring somebody a deal or you bring somebody an idea of a deal that you have explained to them thoroughly and provided all the information about how the deal should work. And then what happens if it doesn't, right? You know what I mean? Before you take money from somebody who makes $160,000 a year, right? And you got $75,000 of that coming out of their IRA. That's their whole thing. Right? You can't just take that and run. The government doesn't want that to happen, right? So the government's idea is, okay, if you're gonna invest from folks that fall under certain thresholds, then you absolutely have to make sure they are crystal clear on what's happening. And that's why we produce that thick stack of documents, right, that we provide to them and their attorneys to look through. So mostly we're going to be dealing in the space of non-accredited investors and accredited investors. The government says if you're going to raise from non-accredited in a single deal, no more than 35 of them, right? You can't have any more than that. You can't have 500 non-accredited.
It's hard to say that these are all close friends and there's 900 of them.
Right.
But if there are 30 of them, maybe.
Yeah, maybe those are pretty close, right? You know, so they're okay if you raise money from people you know well that happen to be under that, and there can't be too many of them, right? But if you raise from people who are over that threshold, government doesn't care. Right. So that's why we see all the time we can get on Facebook now. Right. And some probably since we've been talking about it and our phones listen, there will be something about funds when you scroll down Facebook. Those are not for non-accredited investors. Those are only for accredited investors. Right. So you can't advertise either to people who make under that amount. Right. Again, it's not to jam up the sponsor or the person who wants to do the deal. It's to protect the investor. Right. And I want to say one more thing about that. That I think is really important, and I want you to hear, and I really want the community out there to hear it. We are obviously in a space where investing has become the soup of the day. Everybody's looking into it. Everybody's trying to understand it. And again, you can get on Facebook, Instagram. It really is. It really is. And that's a wonderful thing. But the SEC is watching. And what has happened is the fundraising from non-accredited investors has exploded. I believe it's 30 times as large as any other private equity investment vehicle. Wow. Is raising money from regular everyday folks. Right. Well, yeah, technically crowdfunding is a different, but yes, you know what I mean? At the end of the day, right? So the SEC is now watching very closely, because this is a very new development that everyday folks, folks like you and me and folks that don't even know what we know are out here, getting into the investment game. So last year, fraud claims and misrepresentation claims from state boards and from the SEC increased by 300%. Wow. And it's projected to increase by the same amount next year. So people need to be so careful now about how they go about raising money. And that's what I do. I help them to do it in a legally compliant way, in a way that protects them, in a way that protects their investors. And now it's more important than ever, and this is hot off the presses that the SEC is squarely focused on people who are investing from non-accredited investors.
And how are they spearheading that focus? Are they saying to the sponsor, hey, you got to have your ducks in a row? Are they warning the investors, be careful? What's the approach that's being taken?
The approach is suing the sponsors Yeah, they're taking them to court.
Wow.
They're taking them to jail. They're seizing their assets. It's a disincentive play, right? They're going to make an example out of a lot of folks. There's already several cases where they've put people in jail for years, for investments that look really shady, because what they're hoping is they can kind of stem the tide, or at least get people to do it the right way.
Yeah.
And also, I have to say this too. I have personally seen a lot of fund documents cross my desk from fund attorneys where they're just taking the stuff off. They're just getting PDFs off of Google and just handing them to people and saying, like, good luck, and charging them exorbitant amounts of money for that. Why are they doing that? Because it's a big market now. It's a big business. You can claim you're a lawyer and just say, here, like, take this, and take people for a lot. And so for me, that's concerning, because those same people are going to be the ones that the SEC is looking at. And that lawyer's probably doesn't even have good.
And so the sponsor is the one that's at risk.
Correct.
But he's also getting got by.
He can also get got by the lawyers.
Yes.
I'm a lawyer who will admit all day, not all lawyers are to be trusted in this space. At the end of the day, people get greedy. And, I've seen a lot of people trying to do it the right way and working with attorneys to try to figure out how to be a sponsor. And they're getting hosed too, So folks really need to be careful. And going back again that's why it was so important to me to go learn, at the big firms, how these deals are transacted, so that I can bring that level of expertise back to our community.
I'm going to throw a little curveball at you, but I think you can handle this.
Bring it.
How do we avoid, so we just said black wealth is in vogue. And the way I come about that conclusion, me personally, is that you can go and on Instagram, on YouTube, and find out a guy named Wall Street Trapper.
Yeah, I know.
And so his story is a unique story. He was in jail for 10 years, and one of his cellmates indicated to him, hey, you black folks are doing it the wrong way. And he talked to him about stocks, real estate, and entrepreneurship and running a business. And because he said stocks, that's what Wall Street Trapper gravitated to first. And now he is a teacher on how to navigate the stock system. He's pretty conservative in the way he goes about it.
He really is. I follow him on Twitter.
I follow him. Yeah. I'm a follower. I have his app.
Okay.
And I pay $38 a month to follow how they're trading. And like I said, it's a relatively conservative approach. But who would think a guy that was in jail for 10 years before he was 20 years old would now have 1 million plus followers, and he'd be educating the communities, particularly our community, on how to navigate the stock market.
It's a critical role that he's playing. And I think what it speaks to is, if we have the resources, what I mean? If we have some direction, at least on where we need to go, and we're given an opportunity to go find it, we can do the same thing Warren Buffett does. It's not rocket science, man. It's not rocket science. It's that we're not given access to that information and to those resources, right? And so I think that your business and my business are a part of the fabric of building that out, building out that ecosystem where people can have that same access, right? Yeah. And then we will go as far as we want to go as a community. Yeah.
So here's a curveball at it. Then you've got goes earn your leisure. They're kind of interconnected in some ways, but those I think is a Bilal. There's the two gentlemen that run Earn Your Leisure. I don't know their first names, but
I don't know.
They come from more like a global financial advisor approach. There's nobody in the market really talking about using debt to leverage wealth, and that's really how the game is played, is leveraging other people's capital, whether it's bank capital or private equity, to leverage wealth. Now that we're trying to play in this game, it's in vogue. What's to stop Black Wall Street from happening again? What can we do to make sure that it's not something that is taken from us whenever we get started in this space?
That's a really good question, and it's honestly a very personal question to me. I think about that a lot.
Yeah.
I think that while a lot of things have not changed societally in terms of how we're treated as a people, obviously the prison industrial complex is as strong as it's ever been. You know, it's the new slavery.
Yes.
In a lot of ways, and I don't know how. Well, shouldn't say I don't know how, but we have a lot of work to do to dismantle that. I think that terrorism against our communities is going to be much more difficult today than it was then. At least I would like to think so. At least I can say, y'all better not come to my house. I'll say that. You know what I mean? But I think that if our business is fully integrated into the economy, it's protected by all the same structures that protect everything else, right? It's so the independent wealth is extremely important, but the ways that you go about getting it and what you do with it from there is far more it's far more global, right? So I want to see us invested in the creation of a widget factory in I'm thinking Ukraine because of the war right now, but in wherever. It doesn't really matter where.
It could be right here in the hood.
Or it could be in the hood too, right?
Yeah.
But it's diversified, right? Like the way Warren Buffett approaches his wealth portfolio is, it's conservative diversification. So that's where I want to see us get. I want to see us get beyond independent personal wealth and how nice my car is and how this my that is, and all that, the Instagram stuff. I mean, I love it. It's great, respect it. But the truth is, the real folks is making money and is doing things. You won't even know them.
You won't know them.
You won't know them at all. And I think that we have a lot of opportunity to grow in that direction. So Black Wall Street, you might not even know it exists when it happens again. It's not going to be a place necessarily, or a place that is so openly what it is. It's going to be a collection. People.
You know what's interesting? You talked about. I think you used the term group economics. There are more billionaires, white billionaires in Dallas than there are black billionaires on the planet.
In the world, that's true.
So that sounds like group economics to me.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So if we worry less, because those are relationships. Now, we could talk about, and this is not even about what's racist and what's not racist. People do business with people they have relationships with.
That's a fact.
So those are the people that are close to them. They build wealth together, and the rising tide floats all boats.
All the boats rise with the tide. Right.
So that being said, if we worry less about the flash and say, all right, Sean, you got these skill sets, we've got these skills, let's get on the ground together and partner together to propel forward. With that, you work with businesses, you form, you talked about fund creation, supporting that. You've supported us in building our infrastructure, space and equity, and the multiple prongs that come from that. When you're working with a business that is in the startup phase but has some grease to it, I think that's where we are. We have some grease to what we've got going on.
No doubt.
In the early phases, there's equity, and then there's just paying people with capital, with revenue, right?
Revenue from the business.
And when you're pre-revenue, equity is a play that folks play. How, in your experience, what are good plays for sponsors and founders to protect themselves on the back end? Because if they don't have the revenue to provide, they're like, well, here's a point, here's 2 points, here's 5 points, and all of a sudden,
the points all spread out everywhere.
All spread out. So what is your thoughts in managing that space?
Well, so I'll talk about it from a couple different levels. So first, I think it's important that I've got a lot of clients who are in that same space, right? I'm thinking of one guy right now who's in the industry, gaming, the gaming industry, and that's actually its own world now. There's like doctors, people that just work on people's fingers, that play video games. Like it's sprouted into it. So, we're talking the other day, it's got a valuation came in at, 22 million, and somebody else wanted 26 and somebody else wanted 32, right? That kind of thing. Was willing to pay on those. And so I think that the first thing that people need to do is work with other business owners and work with business attorneys, so they can figure out what the market says is actually appropriate, right? So I've had folks that will take $1 million on a business that's probably worth 200 million, and then they just lost 60% of it, right? But they don't know better, right? So call somebody who maybe knows, like whether it's not another business owner at your level, but somebody who's made it, to where you're trying to get to. Or again, lawyers are great for that because we talk to everybody. We talk to people starting businesses all the time. So I could say to you, okay, based on where your business valuation is now, this money is this percentage of where you're going. So can help them to start to have that thought process. So that's step one, is just having the right people around you to advise. Okay. But probably more importantly than that, the best thing you can do is, if you have a valuation for your company, or you think your company is worth this or that, can you back it up? Can you really back it up? Like a lot of people have, again, phenomenal ideas, right, about what they want to accomplish. And we have a lot of really great marketers and sales folks, in our communities. But not a lot of people that have done it and understand what really goes into raising the value of your company to where that $1 million now, the investor understands that $1 million is not going to buy me as much in this company, right? And it's the day-to-day stuff, How are your contracts? How are your books looking? What's the tax situation? How's your HR? How's your payroll? Right? What is your marketing strategy? And how have you mapped it out? Let me see your standard operating procedures for how people come into the business and how they exit the business. These are the things that folks are looking for. Even my firm, right? We act as vendor to several large companies, and we're looking at really large ones now. They're asking me these types of questions, right? The same questions I ask my clients. So I can say that all the way up to the Fortune 50s, right? They're all looking for the same things. How well is your business built out? So I think the best way to protect equity in your business is to make sure it's really a business. You know what I mean? Make sure it is going as far as it needs to go, which requires partnership with special service providers that can get you to that level. And once you're there, they open the door, right? And then all of a sudden, again, that $1 million only buys them 5%, not 85%, right? That's really the best way to protect yourself. What I've noticed is most investors, not all, most investors are not trying to fleece people. They're buying what they can see, in front of them. They're like, okay, really cool idea. I think there's something there, but you haven't done this, this. You know what I mean? And I haven't seen you do that successfully. So the investors, one deal I'm working on, the investor has to now get a board seat so that she can help oversee what they're doing. There's a lot of work for the investor when you just have a really great idea and maybe like a little bit of traction. The real question is, have you walked through the entire process of building out a business operation that, no matter its size, can operate as and function as efficiently as the biggest companies? That's where you protect your value, right?
So there's something to be said about, is your business a business or a hobby? And I think what differentiates that is one's willingness to invest in the business. What do you say to business owners who are gun shy of making the proper investments? And I say that along the lines of, who are your professional partners?
Right. First, I just advise. I stress, I recommend, I'll please get everybody in place. You know what I mean? That's what I tell them, So if folks are gun shy about putting the money out there and to get the resources to really grow their business, apparently they don't really believe in their business. If they think they can make these shortcuts and they're somehow able to see blind spots that they don't even know exist, if they're not willing to do that, then to be frank, they're not good clients for me, or for my network of service professionals. If they can't get past that psychological barrier, then they just got in their own way. And their amazing idea and all their hard work and ambition and creativity will stay right there. It just won't get any further. So I say to them, no. If you say to me, well, how do I get around? Well, I can't really afford the next. Well, then you can't afford to have a successful business, apparently. You know what I mean? Like, if you can't, and that's fine. Not everybody can afford to create a successful business. But a lot of times it's a perception issue. You know what I mean? Say that business makes, I don't know, $5,000 a month, and that's enough to pay the rent and do what you need to do. And your thought process from there is like, I can't afford to spend anything here. Well, then guess what? You can't afford to ever get past $5,000 a month, I guess. You know what I mean? It's fine. Stay to 5. That's cool. But if you want to see that 15, that 20, that 500, then you've got to invest in yourself. Absolutely. It's like you start a real estate project. and you go buy the land, and then you're like, ooh, but building the building,
kind of expensive.
that's gonna cost a lot. You know what I mean? So what do you have? Well, you got a nice piece of land to sell somebody else.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Congratulations. They're gonna put the resources in to turn it from $1 million project to $100 million project, right? And I think people need to think about their businesses the same way.
We've got to the point where we've got to move from I'm a bootstrap and sweat equity to I need capital and debt.
Yeah.
To scale my business.
Exactly. And we have to get comfortable with that. As you were saying earlier, that's where the real money is, right? It's in private equity to some extent, but really even bigger is debt.
Yes.
You know what I mean? If you can figure out how to get great terms on debt, that's really how deals are done.
Yeah.
Just to provide an example, like I said, I do a lot of fund work, right? So say you want to go buy, and you know this, but say you want to go buy a $30 million multifamily property, right? I'll have people who call me and they say, so how do I raise $30 million? And I say, you don't know what you're doing. You don't raise $30 million, you know?
Yeah.
You raise 30% of it.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Yep.
The rest is debt.
The rest is debt.
The rest is 70% of most deals is debt.
And here's what people don't understand. That's with real estate involved.
Yeah.
Their banks will have criteria to what they'll underwrite an unsecured transaction, meaning there's not real tangible collateral.
Right.
And what that looks like is if you're under 3 times the debt to the capital that the sponsorship team has, you're in a really good place. Meaning, if you have, let's just say, easy numbers, $100,000 in capital, then I'm willing and feel comfortable lending you $300,000 in debt.
Exactly.
Because your ratios are strong enough to support that. And that's that means that there's nothing tangible behind it. They're willing to give you 3 times. In some cases, if you have a strong performer, I remember I had a client that has $100 million worth of Jack in the Box and a few other concepts. And we were willing to go 4.25 on him just because of the proven performance. And a lot of those times you don't have tangible, he may own the real estate, he may not own the real estate. But just think about that concept.
Right.
For him to scale to where he needed to be, he needed that cheap debt.
Right.
And we're willing to give him 4 times of the cash he had. But so many of us are saying, all I got is the money I got. So we're working with the cash in our pockets to make our business run. And that you wonder why you don't scale.
It doesn't work that way. Yeah. Exactly. And you said it absolutely perfectly. So if you want to go buy a $10 million property, you need about $3 million to $3.5 million. Yes. You know what I'm saying? Yep. And then you need Obi, right? Yep. You need a bank. You need a lending scenario to make the rest work.
This is how simple it is. We think it's so impossible. If you utilize that scenario, I have a $10 million project. I need $3 million.
Right.
All you have to do is have proven performance. Most likely, if you have $3 million, your credit shouldn't be
right. Too bad. It should be pretty good.
It should be pretty good. And you're the sponsor. In some cases, you may not even have to guarantee that transaction, but you have multiple banking institutions that will give you money
that will pay you on that day. Yeah. Right. And that's the other side of it, right? So I deal on the equity side more, right? But it is, literally the minority aspect of how the money is raised.
Yes.
So you really have to understand both sides, to get the deal done. And I think, when people think about debt, they think, I owe someone, right? But guess what? You owe someone more with equity.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Debt is cheaper than equity.
Think about that. The same project. Yeah. You want to do the whole project equity-wise. The bank is just saying, pay me back on time, and I'm going to charge you 4.5%, and we good. The equity partner is like, all right, I want pref. I want 30% of the company. Right. All these parameters, and that stays. The bank, it's rinse and repeat.
Yeah.
Now, let's not be, just make it like it's so simple that the bank debt and bank capital is the toughest capital to get. It has the most strings attached to it.
Underwriting is just a beast. Oh my God.
But you can be a lot more flexible with that money than bringing on investors.
Right.
And it takes a lot to get, most of the time, these investors, because they have that capital, they're way more savvy than you are. They've seen more deals.
Right. So you're more likely to be taken advantage of, by your equity side folks than your debt side, right? So I think it takes a village, I mean, a lot of folks, we want to do that $10 million project. You probably don't have the $3 million, right? You know what I mean? So you got to get that, going. But if you can, but you don't need to think about it as a $10 million project. It's a $3 million project and good banking relationships.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That's really the calculus. So I would just encourage people to kind of understand that, and they may be closer to their dreams than they think. You know, I've got a client in Houston who is a developer in the third ward, and you know he develops townhome communities over there.
Okay.
And you know the deal, you know, might be a $2.5 million deal, which is a big deal for a lot of people, right? You know what I'm saying? It'd be a big deal for me, you know?
Yeah.
But, you know, we only had to raise, you know, like $700,000.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
that's not
That's
that
not-
hard,
that's not
you
that
know?
hard.
Like, it's not, I'm not saying it's easy, but it's not, you know, 2.4 million.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like, you know, getting together $500,000 and then figuring out the other is much more attainable.
Yeah.
So you have to understand the debt side as well as the equity side to get deals done.
Well, I appreciate your time, Sean. You're gonna be back with us.
Oh, yeah,
You're
bro.
on the team, so we're gonna do
appreciate
this.
it.
We gotta do about once a quarter. Make
Let's
sure that
go.
you're getting back here. So you guys know where to check us out. Tell the audience, how can they get in contact with Sean Tate?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. So you can reach me most easily through the law firm. Our direct line to the business is 972-946-6262. That's the office number. That'll get you routed through either to me directly or to somebody else who can help you in our office. And then email-wise, if you have questions, you want to set up consultations, ask things about where your business is going, info@tate-legal.com, info@tate-legal.com. Can send your inquiries there. It'll run through my staff, and we'll get you put on the calendar. We do consultations for free for the first 15 minutes. So if folks have quick questions and they happen to fall within our bailiwick, I'm happy to hop on calls or have one of my attorneys hop on calls and take it from there. So y'all can reach me again either via phone 972-946-6262 or via email at info@tate-legal.com.
All right. Sean's also a part of our network, CORECT Consulting. We have a collection of professionals like Sean, we got Firebrand Media as part of that network. So all the professional services that you need at your disposal as an entrepreneur are within that network. You can check us out at spaceequitycorp.com, www.spaceequitycorp.com. Click on About Us and we can get you that information. We can get you tied to Sean through that. Also, make sure to check out our YouTube page again. That is Space and Equity. If you type in Space and Equity, you'll pull us up. Like and subscribe.
That's
Subscribe. We also have an opportunity to look at our Instagram page, OB_empowers and Space Equity Corp. We've got a movement going on. We are part of the Black Wealth and Expansion. We're all here about increasing assets and creating new space. Come correct and they can't stop you.